question has to do with if you have an opportunity that's a smaller business, you can kind of get in ground floor, help grow it, versus going in with a larger corporation where they've got an established infrastructure.
Regardless of payment or the income.
So having worked over the course of my career for both, actually, and Dell's the largest company I've ever worked for previously. I worked at Red Hat for quite some time. When I started at Red Hat, there were 350 people, and there are now about 3,800, something like that. I left them shortly ago. Part of that really depends on how you want your career to carry. What I found anyway is the smaller companies are often going to not pay quite necessarily as well, but it's easier to have a lot more impact in the company. So you get in there, it's easy for you to earn your name and your reputation because there are not so many people around. So if you develop that internal reputation, you're a bit more impactful or a bit bigger influence in that smaller company. Gives you a chance to kind of help grow with them and so forth. The bigger company's probably going to offer a bit more stability and a lot more in the way of benefits and things like that. But it's much harder to stand out from the crowd because the crowd's a lot bigger. And so part of that will depend on what you want to look for. The bigger company can also often offer some interesting flexibility. So for instance, Dell right now is strongly pushing work at home. And they're heavily considerate of people for their compensation and things like that. If they're able to either travel heavily or work from home so that they don't have the expense of sitting in an office all the time. Allows us to grow without growing the facilities expense.
I think I'm going to suggest do some research because we've migrated a business from starting at the very large corporate enterprise side to then spending a decade or two or a couple decades working with what were known as gazelles or the startups that were just going like crazy and growing rapidly, and then in the mid-market. And what I would look at is look at the company, and obviously you're starting your career, so you want to build on a career. And obviously finding a job is our first challenge. But what I would caution you is that a small company that has not changed in the last 20 years, or that's just sitting there, and the only career path there is when the IT guy that's there already retires, and he may not retire. That's not going to build a career. It's not going to build a resume that you want to have over the longer period of time. What we find is that there's a lot of excitement in the smaller emerging businesses, but you've got to start looking at those trends, the ones that you think will be successful and the ones that you're seeing growth paths with. I think anything in the alternative energy field right now, we're working with a lot of those companies, and it's really a good opportunity to get involved, and you're there as a young company, and all of a sudden you find yourself growing with a real, growing position to position, sometimes maybe growing too fast through some of those positions, but obviously rapidly growing companies are going to provide you more career path opportunities and more choice. Then I'm going to say in the large companies, you end up with more stability, you probably end up with more structure, you probably end up with deeper skills coming out of there because that's what they're going to expect out of you, and it's probably going to be more departmentalized, so your career path may not be as broad, but you'll probably be a lot deeper in some of those skills.
I think there's a couple of things you have to think about. One is what's your personality like, what's your needs. I know some students are already into their families and things like that, and a lot of changes isn't in the best interest, or lots of travel, and so you sort of have to match that. But a couple of things to think about isn't so much the size of the business as much as the size of the organization you're going into, or the nature. So for instance, I'll use my example. Let's say you're a programmer. Well, that's what Microsoft does. And so there's literally hundreds of small businesses within Microsoft, and they're all product teams. And they all have different products, widely different customers and things like that. And there's lots of movement inside the company from one team to another. The average time in a job at Microsoft inside is 2.5 years. And then somebody's moving into another role inside the company. And so you get lots of exposure, lots of change, lots of different experiences without having to leave the company. But that's just because that's the nature of it. But a programmer in a company with a very small IT crew, even though the company may have 100,000 employees, there may not be nearly that kind of opportunity. So you really have to look at it from that perspective, is what's the opportunity. And then the other aspect of that is, what are you able to do now to get as much experience? A small company, for example, you may have a lot of different hats to wear, so you're going to get a lot of different experience very quickly. Consulting jobs tend to have that kind of thing where you're going from one engagement or client engagement to another, and you're seeing lots of different businesses and different things, and that's a great way to really learn a lot about the business world and things like that. The downside, of course, is the travel, the change, and particularly in the IT type related fields, the need to keep current. You will never quit studying. You will always have homework at night the rest of your life. And but that's
you just scared them off.
but that's why it pays better than being a history teacher. There's a premium, and on the other hand, your job never gets boring. It's always the next cool new thing, and it's the plus side is you're always going